And before we wrap up our report, here's what the candidates are up to today. Both will crisscross each other's path today. Harris will hold a Get Out the Vote rally at the University of Wisconsin. High-profile musical artists are expected to perform at her rally, and the celeb list continues to grow for the Democratic candidate. She will also campaign at events of North Carolina and Pennsylvania. Now, Donald Trump will speak at a rally in North Carolina as well. And then he is set to speak at a campaign rally in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So as we said, both will be crisscrossing each other's path, and those three are the swing states this time, total of 7. All right, now, the US presidential race has been unprecedented on several levels, but one change that we have seen in the past few months is how top political leaders or their family members have broken decades-long political allegiances and then shifted their support. First up on the list is former presidential hopeful Robert F. Kennedy Jr., son of former Democrat Senator Robert Francis Kennedy, and nephew to slain former President John F. Kennedy. Now, RFK Jr. altered his family's political history when he founded his own party and kicked off his presidential campaign early this year. Shortly after, he dropped his presidential bid and chose to support Republican Donald Trump, ending his family's long-standing legacy of being Democrats. 5 of Kennedy's family members had issued a statement then, calling his support for Trump a sad ending to a sad story. Also, Tulsi Gabbard has chosen to back Donald Trump, once a Democrat congresswoman. She ran for the president in the Democratic primary in 2020. Then in 2022, Gabbard quit the party, and the former Democratic candidate has accused Kamala Harris of abuse of power. She announced her support for Republican hopeful Donald Trump shortly after RFK Jr. suspended his campaign. Let's now talk about the other side. Former Vice President and veteran Republican leader Dick Cheney has endorsed Blue Camp hopeful Kamala Harris. His daughter Liz Cheney, one of Trump's fiercest Republican critics, has also joined the bandwagon, calling Trump a danger to the U.S. Constitution. Her father, who was once George Bush's number 2, has also called Trump a threat to the country. Now, the latest high-profile name to back Kamala Harris is Barbara Bush, daughter of former U.S. President George W. Bush and granddaughter to America's 41st President George H.W. Bush. Moving away from her family's Republican legacy, Barbara Bush has made a statement about backing Harris and protecting women's rights. All right, let's get some perspective now. Paul Sarasic is joining us from Washington, D.C. He's a professor of politics and international relations at Youngstown State University in Ohio and also an adjunct fellow at the Hudson Institute. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast.
Good to be here.
Let me quickly get your assessment of what you thought of the rally that took place in D.C. by Kamala Harris.
Well, I think, unfortunately for Vice President Harris, the rally itself got overshadowed by some things that President Biden said basically in response to what happened at the Trump rally in Madison Square Garden, where at the Trump rally, and the reason you had this clip on earlier of Trump trying to talk about his support for Puerto Ricans in the United States, and Puerto Rico is, of course, part of the United States. Is because a comedian at that rally referred to Puerto Rico basically as garbage. And President Biden came out and said, well, the only garbage are Trump supporters. And there's some question about what he meant by the word supporters, whether he meant all the people that are supporting Donald Trump or the comedian who spoke at the Madison Square Garden rally. But there's been more discussion of that than there was about, Kamala Harris's, closing argument in the eclipse in Washington, D.C.
Right. Is this one of the most tightest races you have seen? And if so, what do you think makes this race to power so different?
Well, I think, we've been seeing tight races in the United States for a long time, arguably for the last basically 25 years. If you recall back in 2000, it was basically 500 votes in Florida that decided that election, 500 or 600 votes in favor of George W. Bush, who got elected in that election. So we've been kind of 50-50 for a long time. There were some temporary movement. Certainly in 2008, Barack Obama had basically an overwhelming win, but it wasn't a landslide. We don't have landslide elections in the United States right now. We really, really are unbelievably evenly divided in this country.
Right, it does seem so. Also, a week to go, as we keep saying, with opinion polls so neck and neck, and that even, in fact, proves your point of how polarized the entire country is. What do you think the two candidates are going to eye for in the next 7 days?
Turnout. I think the persuasion phase of the campaign is over. Now both sides need to make sure that their voters vote. Either they voted already, and we have a lot of early voting in the United States. Millions and millions of people have already cast their election. But what they're going to do now is focus all their money and attention on making sure that those people who haven't voted yet show up and vote. And given how close it is, that's going to make all the difference.
Right. I have to talk to you about the undecided voters. I know the percentage of the undecided voters is extremely small, as most of the people in America have made up their minds. But is there a chance they don't vote at all? And if that happens, who does it favor, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris?
I think we are seeing some evidence that some of these people are not going to vote at all. They just don't like the choices they have and are just going to stay home. It's really hard to tell who that helps or hurts, this far out, because we don't know kind of what, where those voters would have gone. We don't know whether they're 50-50 or not. It's almost impossible to tell. I mean, the problem with undecided voters is they probably don't respond to polls either. So we don't know what they think. We don't know which direction they're going to go. Again, this election is extremely hard to call right now, to predict. We're all grasping at straws out there. People are looking at who's already voted, whether they're more Republicans, more Democrats, and they're speculating from that. What we know in the United States is that our polling has been broken, and it's been broken since at least 2016, and arguably before that. That we know we're probably not getting it right. We just don't know how we're wrong.
All right, Mr. Sarasik, always good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your insights from Washington, D.C.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.